Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we're looking at something rather interesting. These are particular rifles were manufactured by Colt Canada or Diaco for Colt Defense for the LE market. Now there's a very few amount of these that were made. For the average shooter, it's no big deal. For somebody who knows what they are, they're pretty darn valuable. But first I want to do a call out to thank the gun room out here in Houston. They were very generous to our channel, allowing us to borrow several different weapons for us to do reviews on. He had a very nice collection out there, and he's given me free reign, so we're going to be seeing a lot of interesting pistols and some long guns coming from them. But let's go back in time a little bit, probably to around the 2008-2009 time period. Back at that point, Colt Defense was looking to buy Diaco. Diaco was a division of Haru DevTech. Diaco goes back a long ways. They were Canada's center for excellence for small arms repair. Diaco was responsible for all of the weapons maintenance for the entire Canadian Defence Force. Around 1980-85, in that area in there, Canada had what they call a SARP program, or a small arms replacement program, where they were looking to replace their FALs with a new rifle. And the rifle they chose was based off of the M16A2. It was the soon-to-be C7 and C8 rifle. Now, those rifles were built off of the technical data packages provided by Colt. Now, Colt did not provide the technical data to Diaco. The license was to the Canadian government, and the Canadian government licensed Diaco to produce those rifles. And those rifles are quite different in a lot of ways from the American rifles. First and foremost is the machining techniques. Diaco preferred, or the Canadian Defence Force preferred, using Colt hammer forged barrels. Every one of those rifles was produced by Canada, was always Colt hammer forged. They also modified a lot of the TDP, so it's not a straight Colt TDP rifle. Back in the original days, they got rid of the A2 sight in favor of an A1 field sight. They made some changes to the bolt materials and so forth. Diaco is extremely high quality precision machining. When you see the Diaco facility, even compared it to Colt, the Colt looks fairly antiquated. Diaco is a very modernized machining capabilities. Quality control. It's a very impressive operation. The first time I went up there was probably around 2002, 2003, during my research for Black Rifle 2. I really didn't know what to expect. Canada is obviously not known for making military small arms. I was expecting to go up there and see the McKenzie brothers sitting out front saying, "We make guns here, eh?" And that was not the case. I was really impressed with what I saw. Now, throughout the years, Colt has had a relationship with Diaco. Diaco has been used for their engineering capabilities. Now, if you look at the engineering capabilities of Diaco, they vastly outperform Colt Defense for many years. You go back to the 90s, in the 2000s, Colt was plagued with union problems with strikes and so forth. They weren't able to produce the rifles that were needed because of the issues with Colt engineering and their lack thereof of a lot of ability because of a lot of the labor unions and so forth. They utilized Diaco's engineering groups to work on several programs that they couldn't finish. And a major one would be the Colt LMG. That was a program that Colt Defense just did not have the time or the money to work on, so they gave it to Diaco, and they developed it there. Which, because they were a smaller organization, they were much more prone to be able to do and more set up to do smaller runs than Colt Defense, which is basically a mass producer of rifles. And also during the Global War on Terror, early days, when Colt was making a lot of M4 carbines, they did utilize Diaco as a part subcontractor, primarily upper receivers and bolt carrier groups. So around the 2003-2004 time period, there was discussion of Haru DevTech wanting to sell Diaco. Colt Defense was obviously very interested because they work together. It's a very good relationship. And Diaco was responsible for other parts of the world where Colt was not. They sort of split up the world, like Scandinavia, England, and so forth. Those were areas that were being utilized by Diaco rifles. So the playing field was split up between Colt Defense and Diaco. Around the 2000, I would say 8-9 period, was when the sale was actually done. Colt's intent was, at that time, because of the major government contracts, they were unable to fulfill law enforcement contracts, let alone anything commercial. So the idea was they would purchase Diaco, they would use them to take care of their law enforcement sales, as well as the subcontract components out for their military sales. Well, unfortunately, there was not very well planned out. Come to realize that there was an issue with bringing in rifles from Canada for law enforcement and commercial sales. But due to the importation ban of assault weapons, they could not be brought in for commercial use. Now, law enforcement use was a different ballgame. They could bring them in for law enforcement use, but there was conditions. There had to be end user certificates, and they had to be drop shipped right to the law enforcement agency. And they were not to be sold to civilians. They were supposed to stay within the law enforcement agency. This really made a big mess for Colt. Colt was not expecting this. The difficulty of bringing guns in, they could not bring them into the factory in Connecticut and distribute them. It was very, very difficult. So there was an additional run of a few different models. Those models were the AR-15A3 tactical rifle, the law enforcement carbine, the AR-15A2 government carbine, and of course the LE6933, which is 11.5-inch barrel, and the LE6921, which was a 14.5-inch barrel. There was a small number of those that were brought into the United States, and they were drop shipped directly to law enforcement agencies. What makes these rifles special is they were manufactured in Canada using mostly Canadian components. The only parts that were supplied to Colt Canada were the fire controller group, which at that time was on the .170 diameter hammer and trigger pin, oversized trigger group, and the stock assemblies, and the handguards for some of the models as well. So basically what you have here is you have a Colt hammer forged barrel, you have the benefits of the updates in materials, and you have an extremely high quality rifle. Now, these rifles did find their way outside of law enforcement. They did find their ways onto Gunbroker and other places like that. They were found on the used market. In fact, this particular rifle that we're looking at here, this AR-15A2 government model, was a former police rifle that was sold. So these rifles did show up in all different configurations. I think what really made these things special was the fact that you had the Diaco barrel. Now, for as far as the markings were concerned on the barrel is marked with Colt defense markings. With the Diaco, you would be looking at the DovTech D stylized D. Then you'd have the 1/7 NATO, and you would also have a batch code on there so they could track down when the barrel was made and the materials and so forth. This was produced with Colt markings from Colt Defense, the CMP 1/NATO. However, it's not the same marking you'd be able to tell when you look at it. It was not the same as Colt Defense. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through this rifle and we're going to show the differences between the Colt Defense and the Colt Canada or Diaco components. Starting on the rear of this rifle, we do have a Colt Defense provided stock. The stocks utilized by Colt Canada are very different from this. They're more of a pebble type. It's much different. Now, the receiver extension is quite different. If you notice on the Colt rifle here, you'll see there's threading on the receiver extension. You'll see this is smooth. This is one of the parts that is this Colt Canada, which is very different from Colt Defense. You will see current production, 2018, where you're seeing more of the Colt stylized parts. But this was one of the earlier ones. If you notice, the Diaco rifle here has a charcoal gray finish versus the jet black of the Colt Defense. That's something also that's been indicative with Diaco for many, many years. We go back to the original. They were using the Colt gray finish. It wasn't up until more recently, over the last few years, where you saw a change go to the jet black finish that's being used today. The quickest way to be able to tell if you have a Colt Canada rifle is you'll see right on the left side of the receiver, right beneath where it says Colt Defense Hartford, Connecticut, it says Made in Canada. Now looking up front here, we have the handguards, which are the single heat shield. Be conducive with Colt Defense sending these handguards to them, but these also were manufactured by Colt Canada or Diaco for their C8 rifles. The front sight base is a standard A2 on this one, which would be correct because you have a fixed carrying handle. Now, something else about Colt Canada was they have never used an F-mark front sight base, even with their flat top upper receivers. What they've done is they've gone ahead and they've made a longer front sight post to compensate rather than utilizing a different front sight base. There's very different needs. The Colt rifles utilize a lot of components that were not necessarily necessary due to the fact that they wanted to show that the rifle was not part of the M16 family, but it was their own M4 family. It was very important for Colt to have several features on there that were not conducive with the original M16. Reason being is if it was the parts came from the M16, it was subjected to the 1968 licensing agreement, which meant Colt did not have the rights to it. By having components that were developed at Colt's cost onto this new rifle, this is what made this thing be able to be the M4 family of rifles, where that didn't really matter up in Canada. The barrels, as we said, at Colt we have a standard button cut barrel. Diaco Colt Canada, you have the Colt hammer forged barrel, which is also chrome plated. Those barrels were very well known for being very, very durable, very high quality. But unfortunately, we just can't get them here in the U.S. because of the importation ban. But these did get in because it was a law enforcement contract. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a closer look at some of the internal parts that shows how you identify a Colt Canada or Diaco part compared to a Colt. This rifle here has the complete Diaco Colt bolt carrier group. They're marked as such, and that's what we're going to take a look at right now. Now, first off, if you take a look down here, you have the standard Colt, and you can see that there's a C on here, which means Colt. The Diaco, you'll see there's the stylized D located up on here, which indicates that it's Diaco. The next thing that we're going to notice is the carrier staking. If you notice on the Colt, we have straight across here, we have the staking. But if you notice, they're offset on the Colt Canada. Now, Colt Canada, Diaco has done this from day one. They felt this was a better way to do it. Does it really make that much of a difference? I really couldn't say. The next we have here is the bolt. Now, the proof marks on the Colt are MPC, Magnetic Particle Proof Tested Colt. The Diaco was MPD, but you also notice there's a 4-digit batch code on there as well. The batch code enables Diaco or Colt Canada to be able to track down all the metallurgy reports in case there's any kind of an issue. They would be able to call them back as a batch. And the next thing that it has, when you look in the inside, is when you remove the extractor. On the extractor, you'll see towards the rear, you'll see on the Colt a C. And on the Diaco, you'll see the DevTech D. Now, that's all changed right now. Right now, there's no more DevTech D. The Colt Canada now just has a CC on it. So we're going to go over the model rifle we have here as well. Now, the rifle model we have here, outside of the fact this is Colt Canada, is the AR-15A2 government model. This is perhaps the oldest firearm that Colt has in its AR-15 lineup still in production. This goes back to the original AR-15A2, which would probably be in the late 80s, probably 88, 87, 88, with the introduction of this particular model. So we have the thin pencil barrel, and we have the A2 rear sights. So this is also the only rifle that Colt has other than the 9mm where you still have a fixed carrying handle. But this rifle here has the fully adjustable A2 rear sights. The iterations of the rifle with the stock, you go to the original polymer stock, which is the smooth side, or the Generation 2, and this is the current generation M4 stock. It usually came with a H buffer in them or a standard buffer. It didn't really make much of a difference unless you were using the M855 ammunition, but I do believe these were always produced with the H buffer. Standard pistol grip. Now this one has the front pivot pins that are removable. When this rifle first came out, it utilized the large screw and collet that was used on the original AR-15, AR-15A2 rifles. It then switched over to a pin where you had the pin that went through, then you had a small screw that went on the left-hand side, and now we're to the iteration where we have the standard A2. After the Sporter series was introduced, you also had a Sporter lightweight that was in this model. They did introduce the magazine release bosses you see here, but up front, it didn't have the front pivot pin as you see today. It had a cutout where you had the screw and collet. Then they went down to utilizing a standard front pivot pin, but it had a small screw in the side. Then they eventually went over to the standard M16A2 lower receiver configuration. It had the original safety in the beginning. The one it has on now is the later version where it can be reversed left or right hand side. Upper receiver, standard bolt carrier group. This is the pencil barrel that goes all the way through, the lightweight. This was really designed as a patrol type rifle. And back in the late 80s and 90s, it was excellent. And then once the 2000s came around, we came up with a flat top. And with the 1913 rail, the switch over to optics, this model did pretty much become obsolete. But there were still police departments who did not want to issue optics. They wanted a standard basic rifle. I think that's why this one still exists today, is because it still offers you a basic rifle that it could be used without optics, old reliable by having the iron sights. For as far as the ammunition was concerned, this was a 1 7-inch twist barrel, so it could take anything out there. It did have the M4 feed ramps as well, and the barrel extension and an upper receiver. So it had all those updates to it, but it would be able to take any kind of ammunition that you could possibly imagine. So you could go from 55 grain right up to the 77 grain. So it's not obsolete in the fact that it can still take any kind of ammunition. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to take this rifle out to the range and we're going to see how it shoots. As I previously stated, there's several rifles that this is offered in. You had the AR-15A2 government model, you had the AR-15A3 tactical, the LE6920, LE6921, LE6933. Serial numbers were also unique for the Canadian-made rifles as well. For instance, the AR-15A3 tactical, or that would be the model AR-6721, your prefix numbers would be LBC. LE6920 law enforcement carbine, that'll be LEC prefix. The LE6520, which is this model here, will be LLC as a prefix. The LE6921 would also be LEC, same as the law enforcement carbine 14.5. Now the barrels will be marked, again, CMP 55680. However, there have been some barrels that have been seen as being marked CC, or Colt Canada. I have not personally seen those, but I have been reported that those do exist. The rifle shot well. It shot like any M4 you would expect, or any M4 type rifle you would expect. Reliable. There was no issues with it whatsoever. Ammunition was primarily the Black Hills 77 grain OTM, that's pretty much a staple of mine for accuracy. I also had some of the XM193 and XM855 that shoot in it as well. Rifle, again, shot very, very well. But it's sort of a unique rifle in the fact that it does hold the space of being the longest running production Colt rifle that's in the industry right now. These rifles are out there, and if you're just a shooter, I guess it won't make much of a difference to you. If you're a collector and you know what this rifle is, being the combination of Colt Defense, Colt Canada, this rifle could be very valuable as a collector's item. The costs don't really reflect Colt Canada. They reflect standard Colt prices. For any of my friends out there who have nice beards, I've been trying a new product which has a shampoo, a conditioner, some different oils, and so forth, and it makes an incredible difference on your beard. In fact, I drive my wife nuts. Say, hey, gotta come feel how nice this is. So check out the link in the description box, and there's a 50% discount on that as well. But like I said, your beard will never feel the same. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video and found it interesting. If you did, please click like, please subscribe, even better share, and please consider donating to our Patreon account. Thank you.